Right, welcome everyone to the new JFK Show. We've got the hound dog, Larry Rivera, sniffing out the documents that were released in 2017. And I don't know of anyone, do you, Dr. Fetzer, that's doing more in-depth work on the documents?
I think Larry's doing the most to keep the community current and abreast, though whether others are paying attention is a good question. They seem more interested in undermining the latest research than they do in advancing our knowledge and understanding of JFK.
Yeah, it's always perplexed me about that. I thought I would be welcome with open arms in JFK, but I really wasn't, and back in the early days. So Larry, what you got for us tonight, man? What have you uncovered next?
Well, amazingly enough, in the new documents that were released in 2017 and 18, with the last release being April the 26th of 2018, I've counted about, I think, almost 20,000 new documents, and all these documents have, just thousands of pages. So, and we've spoken before about the lack of searchable capabilities built into these PDFs. However, and I've also mentioned that the people over at maryfarrell.org have indexed, a lot of these documents. However, there still remain a lot of documents that are not PDF searchable. And obviously, we've mentioned this so many times, that it's probably been done on purpose. A lot of people, they're looking for smoking guns and they're not going to find them. However, you will find a lot of pieces missed to the puzzle, a lot of pieces of that overall puzzle, and you will find key pieces. And among those, for example, in Mexico City, we've talked about in past shows about Leering 3 and Sylvia Duran, and how Elena Garro de Paz, the people that vouched for this supposed Sylvia Duran, Lee Oswald love affair, after they met so very briefly at the consulate, and then all of a sudden they're supposed to be in bed together and whatever. And then we discovered that the people, quote unquote, people who supposedly vouched for those encounters turned out to be completely inaccurate, completely unreliable. Okay, Elena Garro de Paz, who was a kook, and this Leering 3, who we discovered had worked for one Wallace Roughton, and he was an undercover agent, a spy who went to Central America, and his wife worked on the other side, going to Cuba, and they worked in tandem for the CIA. And at one point, Roughton said that this guy would do anything, even sell his mother, So he's the one that then later on, 4 years later, in 1967, said, "Oh yeah, I went to bed with Sylvia Duran, and then we were supposed to believe that." And when he had a safe house, which had been bugged and all that. So I'm just giving you guys, so sort of like a recap of what we have done before on this Mexico City thing. Now, to bring you up to date. There were two operations going on there. One was wiretapping, telephone wiretapping, and that was Project LIENVOY, LIENVOY, LIENVOY. And the other one was photographic surveillance, which was LIEMTY, LIEMTY. All right. Now, what is so particular about both of these operations projects, operations that were ongoing at the same time, and they were both being run by Win Scott, aka Willard Curtis, and which was his pseudonym, and these were very important because they were monitoring the Soviet embassy and the Cuban consulate, and embassy, so they were trying to maintain control over and make sure that they knew about who was going where, with who and what and whatever, So both of these operations were of extreme importance. Now, the person we're going to talk about tonight was an agent for the CIA, and she worked in Mexico City for about 20-something years. And it's a woman, okay, and she's been cited and she's been talked about in many books. Her name was Goodpasture, okay? And the information coming out of the new documents is just fascinating, guys, you know.
Well, Larry, can you explain to me and our audience what was the primary reason for all these shenanigans to go on to make it appear that Lee Oswald was in Mexico City?
Well, the thing about where we place Lee Oswald in all of the this whole scheme, Gary, is that since they had so much control over both audio and video surveillance of these key installations there, they should have been able to capture Lee Oswald when he was supposedly went to the consulate and when he supposedly went to the embassy. Okay, and the operation was, you know, was so incredibly
elementary.
No. I'm talking about involved. You know, a lot of personnel. Okay, a lot of equipment. You know, invested in this. A lot of safe houses. You know, at least 3 different safe houses. You know, from which they took all these pictures. You know, and labs. You know, developing film and I'm going to show you guys an image now that's going to show you the actual audio room that contained all the audio equipment. And Gary, you know a lot about this, so you're probably going to be able to identify some of this stuff. You know?
Yeah, I'm a gearhead from way back, man.
The reel-to-reel decks, you know, and stuff, you know, and it's just when I found this photograph, I thought about you, Gary. I said, "Wow, Gary's going to freak out when he sees this," you know. But anyway. The whole process of wiretapping and all the telephone lines that had to be wiretapped, okay, and then transcribing, having all the personnel, you know. So what we find in these documents and why we know all this information is because obviously the CIA had to budget, okay, and in order to budget, they had to give you all of the information of what was going to be done with this money. So that's why we know what we know when we look at these documents. And in Ann Goodpasture's case, the 201 file, and I'm sure it's been scrubbed, okay? And I'm going to tell you why, because her 201 file, and let me just start a screen share here real quick with you guys, okay, if I may. Because this is really gonna, can you guys see this?
Yeah, it's coming up. Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. This is the cover of her 201 file, which the only person who reviewed this was Dan Hardway. Okay, you guys know Dan Hardway with Ed Lopez. They're the guys that wrote that report on Oswald in Mexico City, the Lopez report, and we've talked about this one also before. And actually I've been in touch with Dan, you know, working on some of this stuff in the last couple of weeks. But anyway, this guy, he went over, I don't remember you guys when we also talked, when we're talking about Learning 3, how Dan and Ed were only allowed to go into certain areas over there at Langley and look at the files and take notes. And
right.
They were not allowed to photocopy or anything, you know. And they wrote this incredible report based on that, just on the notes. And they had a babysitter who would look at the notes before they were able to leave. And that's where all this Joanides thing comes out, because Joanides was the guy that was there to supervise, you know, what they were doing over there, you know, with all the files, all the CIA files that they were requesting and this and that. And when they caught on to the fact that Lopez and Hardway were pretty smart guys, you know, and they were requesting files, you know, that were really getting close, you know, to those crown jewels that they were trying to, you know, protect, you know, then they started to cut them off and they started to make it very impossible for them to continue. But basically this woman, Ann Goodpasture, what her responsibility was to coordinate and collate all of the information that was coming out of the audio tapes. Now, LIENVOY, the LIENVOY project was a joint operation between the U.S. government and the Mexican government, okay, where the Mexican government allowed the U.S. to intercept all these telephone lines so that not only to benefit the U.S. government, the CIA, but the president at the time of Mexico, who was Adolfo López Mateos. And what Mateos did was he would use the technology and what the CIA was doing to go and eavesdrop and find out what his enemies were doing, okay? And in this case, all the Communist Party, and all of his political opponents and stuff like that. So it was like a real symbiotic relationship where both of them, benefited, from the operation. And since it was being done in Mexico, in their backyard and everything, it had to be really, really protected. This is really, really hush-hush. And where does this Ann Goodpasture fit into this whole scheme? She was the one right below Win Scott. Win Scott was the COS, chief of operations there at the Mexico station, chief of station, COS, chief of station in Mexico City. And the one person below him was Ann Goodpasture. And she had a cryptonym. She had an identifier because she did not go by her name. All right, just like all of, everything else that was going on in Mexico City, everybody in every operation had their code name, like we said before, Learning 3 and Route and all this, So we're going into a whole new scheme here that has never been actually explored before, and so she was a lifer, okay, with the CIA. She started in the CIA in the 40s. Actually, I think she was one of the original, what do they call those? When you're there from the beginning?
Charter.
Charter, exactly. Yeah. She was a charter employee there for the CIA. And she was so valuable that every time that she would request, a transfer, they would say, no, you're too valuable in Mexico City. You have to stay there, And I don't think that she ever got married, okay? And so this is her 201 file. If you look at here, it's 288 pages. And right here, I'm in 1973. The file starts, and I'm going to go all the way down here to the beginning, okay? The file starts, I think, in the 40s when she first started to work. Okay, it's here in 1947. All right, and this is her actual application. Okay, and there's tons of information and documents and stuff. But guess which ones are the ones that are missing, Jim? You're not.
Not again.
Gee, it couldn't be around 1963, could it, Larry?
Of course. So, actually, yeah, there's a picture of her when she was a young, right there. You guys can see that here.
Oh, you got a picture? I've been looking for a picture the whole time. I got one. I got a picture.
Very odd, but she looks quite a lot like my mother.
Hey,
okay.
let me have to share real quick. I'm going to show you a picture I have of her.
So, Oklahoma University, I mean, a lot of detail here. But then when you get to 1963, all of a sudden, poof,
I think Gary wanted to introduce a photograph he found of her.
Yeah, let me have the screen share real quick, Larry.
All right. Stop share.
Just stop share.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Now here's our gal right here.
Yeah.
CIA assistant Ann Goodpasture.
Yeah.
Two princes.
I'm just telling you, she looks surprisingly like my mother. I'm just rather taken aback. Go ahead, Larry.
Oligard the other day, Oli was saying that he found out his mother was CIA and the father, so Might even be
my
her.
mother most certainly was not, but there was a resemblance.
Really? And Peter Janian, oh man.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
So, let me see.
St. John Hunt, same thing.
So,
Yeah, resume share, yeah.
okay, so going back to her 201 application for federal employment. I mean, so much detail here, and like I said, when you move up, you go up, you know, into the 1950s. Okay, I mean, even every time that she was moved up in pay, you know, in classification, you know, from a GS7 to 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever, you know, it's in here. It's in here. Okay. But when you try to see, you know, what she was doing in 1963, you know, it's, hey, it's not here in 1958, 59, okay, you know, and so on and so forth. You know, here's something 47, you know, and, you know, like I said, you know, she was a charter member. She was a lifer, okay, and she was very reliable, and she was very good at what she did.
Yeah, I expected her to look more Hispanic, but maybe that was part of the reason they had her. You know, she could speak both languages. She looked more American to me.
Yeah.
You know.
So what I want to do, let me switch. I'm just gonna.
Like Sylvia Duran, she is a Spanish woman. You can tell. Beautiful one now.
Yeah. Okay. This is not what I want to see. Can you pause that for a second?
Sure.
Larry, there she is again. I actually saw her picture on Google too.
Yeah, we're going back to good old Ann Goodpasture, and what comes out of the files here is this organizational chart. Okay, and at the top of the chart, if you can see over here, you can hardly tell because this is taken straight from the documents, from the new documents. LIENVOY project. LIENVOY means wiretapping. Okay?
Wiretapping project.
Wiretapping project, and it has to do with a joint operation between the CIA and the Mexican government, whereby the Mexican government benefits from the technology possessed by the CIA to also wiretap for the advantage of the president of Mexico at the time, who was Adolfo López Mateos.
Yeah, so he's monitoring all his political enemies with the help of the CIA and giving them what they want. So
exactly, Gary. What's going on here is he is making it possible for the CIA to do this, you know, in a very hush-hush manner, so that at the same time, you know, he's going to say, okay, I'll let you guys, you know, do the Russian embassy, but you guys got to do this for me also, you know. So it's you know, a symbiotic relationship, you know, like I said, and what you have here is
an enterprise
from top to bottom, okay, and the person who answers right below Wynn Scott is this one Robert B. Riggs. And as you were saying before, the first name that comes to mind is Bobby Riggs, who was, you know, the tennis player who was he, Gary, that you were saying?
The Battle of the Sexes. He was defeated by Billie Jean King. It was a big political boo-hoo.
Yeah, and isn't this pretty much around the same time that would be going on?
No, because that happened in the early 70s, I believe.
Yeah, this is in the 70s.
But still, no. This is in the this is in 1963.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Still, at that time, Bobby Riggs was a pro. You know, So anyway, Robert B. Riggs, he's a case officer, and Robert B. Riggs happens to be Ann Goodpasture. Okay, and I'm going to show you guys now why we know this. You know, based on the documents. And also, I have to say that this is not something new. Bill Simpich published this in State Secrets, his book State Secrets, where he's the first one, and based on just one document, and I'm going to show you guys what which document that was. But I found additional corroborating evidence that proves that Bill was right. You know, we can't talk bad about Bill all the time. You know,
Does Miss
good work.
Goodpasture do interviews? Have y'all tried to contact Miss Goodpasture? Oh, she's not alive.
She's long dead.
Oh.
But anyway, what you have here is this organizational chart, okay? And the one person right below the chief of station, Willard Curtis, also known as Win Scott, is Ann Goodpasture. And below her are the people that feed her the results, you know, the data of all of the wiretaps, okay? One person collects the tapes, another person takes the tapes, they listen to the tapes, they transcribe them, they translate them. This is a big thing. This is a big operation.
Where is the EE, probably the audio, and the SR, the video?
Where, up here?
Yeah.
Could be. What I wanted to show you guys, see up here the budget?
Yeah,
$57,000. In $1963, you know, what do you estimate that?
$250,000.
A change. Couple hundred thou.
Yeah.
A couple of hundred. Well, who knows? But anyway, we're going to see, like I said, an image of the room that contained all the equipment that did all this taping and whatever. But anyway, these LIENVOYs with the number next to them represent underlings or people that were working in the project. You've got monitors, transcribers, a watchman, somebody who handled the files, okay? And what happens is that once they process all of this, transcribers, the files are taken to this guy, LIENVOY 2, then Arnold, the staff agent, and he's the one who meets with Goodpasture, and it's so it's such an espionage operation where I've read where Goodpasture would meet with Earhart here before 8 in the morning, you know, in coffee shops, you know, and in places, you know, that they would designate so that she would receive the files, you know, and then read them and evaluate what needed to be acted upon. Okay, so
yeah, it looks like they had a bunch of people listening, and like on the left side, those people would just listen all the, and if there's anything worth transcribing, would probably bring it.
Well, they actually recorded everything, Gary. Everything.
I'm sure
they recorded everything. They didn't leave anything out, and that is why, you know, when they come out and they say, you know, oh, we have tapes of Lee Oswald, you know, calling the Russian embassy, you know,
it should be there. It should be there.
It should be there. And then we have, we've talked about these people before, Boris and Tarasov, who were actual translators, and they couldn't identify the guy who supposedly was Oswald. They were on record, not only for the HSCA in closed sessions, but in their actual testimony before the HSCA, and they're on record as saying, look, you know, I could not identify that person as Lee Oswald, period.
Right.
Okay, so anyway, you see here the targets. Okay, this is really interesting here. Targets, and then you got the Mexican side of the ledger, and then you've got Wolfak means CIA, okay, and you've got the Cuban embassy, and these are all actual telephone numbers, Jim. 1442. These are the actual telephone numbers that were being wiretapped.
Really?
Yeah. Vasquez Gomez, Soviet embassy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Czech embassy 2 numbers, Polish embassy, and over here all of the
15
people.
numbers right there on the left. 15.
Yeah. Yeah. And then let me tell you that month after month after month, you have the project reports, which are also in the new documents, where they do the evaluations and, you know, okay, what happened, you know, what was said in these tapes, and how should we act upon this and that, and they actually were able to counter, you know, for example, to find out who was coming from Cuba and how they would counter that, you know, and based on these tapes, you know, they were way ahead of of the game, you know, with everything that was going on between Cuba and Mexico, you know, and that kind of thing. I mean, this was like, I mean, real heavy stuff here, you know. So
a general is being wiretapped.
Yeah, and over here, not only are people, you've got magazines, newspapers, you know, you've got Movimiento Liberación Nacional, you know, and so all the angles were covered here, guys, you know. So that's why.
The point you're trying to make is that to bug 4 embassies and all these people takes an awful lot of manpower.
Yeah, I think that the guys at Watergate should have, you know, come and, you know, got some training from these guys, you know.
Talk to Miss Goodpasture and let her show you how it's done.
No shit. Okay, so now this is a passage from Goodpasture's HSCA. It wasn't actually, yeah, I think it was a testimony or maybe a closed session, and where she's saying, well, I don't think so, because I thought I saw those transcripts before Mr. Scott did. The way the paperwork ran was that those transcripts were given to the outside contact who brought them to me, okay? I looked at them, and in case of someone who was speaking in Russian or a language that the monitors could not transcribe at the listening post, that one copy of that transcript and the tape went immediately to the person handling the other transcriber. Okay, so she's describing actual blow-by-blow procedures of what, you know, how, you know, this project ran. Okay, and this is the one reference that Simpich used to identify Riggs as Goodpasture. Okay, and this was before the new documents came out. Okay, I have other documents that show, you know, what she was all about. Okay, now this is a field assignment questionnaire. Okay, and
reassignment. Yeah, reassignment. Yeah.
Yeah, this field reassignment. Yeah, and this this is her. These are her actual responsibilities, Jim. Okay. And if you want to go ahead and go from 1 to 6.
Liaison with the legal attaché, requests for traces and investigations, case officer for miscellaneous CE operations, such as 25 short-term physical or technical surveillances, alternative contact with blank inside officer responsible for processing take from 3 anti-Soviet photo surveillance bases, alternate for station photographer, flaps and seals, prepares briefing papers and other materials used by COS for special briefing for representatives from headquarters or other U.S. official, government and private agents, case officer handling blank who supervises the Intercept Center for semi-official telephone tap operations covering 30 lines simultaneously. Alternate contact for blank who supervises a semi-official support project. Pending assignment, additional SR ops officer, case officer for blank, militarial outside translator. She's a rather key player, Larry. I mean, she's the center of all.
Absolutely, and not only that, she's a jack of all trades and master of all, in my opinion.
Yes,
you know? Yeah. And look at her grade at the time at GS-13.
Super competent official. That's why they couldn't afford to transfer her.
That's right. You know, and COS, chief of station. You know, like I said before. You know, and case office operational support for five anti-Soviet support type and technical projects, flaps and seals and photo for special projects when other techs are not available. Other duties assigned by COS. You know, I mean, here's a picture that I found of her, and then right here, you can go pick it up right here. It is strongly urged.
It is strongly urged by COS, Chief of Station, that this extremely valuable and all-round officer be returned to the Mexico City station. Riggs would be one of the most difficult persons to replace in the Mexico City station because of the variety of types of work he does, and all well and effectively, and because of his detailed knowledge of CE operations, Soviet personalities and targets, and general capabilities.
And notice how they refer to her as a he.
Right, because of her cover name.
Yeah, I mean, what better way to hide this person? Okay, so then this is a monthly operational report for the project. Okay, this just to give our audience a sample, and notice the date down here, 23 August 1963. This is the closest that I got, and this is not from her file. This is from another file of Project LIENVOY. Okay, and I just wanted to show you guys, how thorough they were in analyzing, distributing, and taking action on all of the data and all the information and all the audio that came into, these surveillance operations.
Just for the benefit of anyone who doesn't understand the importance of the operation of faking an Oswald visit to Mexico City, it's there. He is alleged to have sought to obtain a visa to go to Cuba to make his escape after having assassinated the President of the United States. Ostensibly, it would be claimed on behalf of the Soviet Union and Fidel Castro. So this would have initiated World War III. Lyndon backed off on it because he saw it was too much of a hot potato and too risky, but that was the scheme, the plan at the time.
That's right. And the thoroughness of this whole operation leaves one to, think, that, wait a minute, if these guys were this thorough, how did they miss Lee Oswald? It's,
well, they didn't miss him. He wasn't there, and they didn't realize their own surveillance would expose the guy that was sent down to fake him was such an obvious imposter.
Something, Jim. Now that you mentioned that, in the new documents, that I've read passages that show that was a bonehead mistake by the CIA.
Yes.
To have released that, because what that did was that attracted attention to the project, the LIENVOY project, which is the one that did the photo surveillance. Okay.
Well, I have a source who's identified the imposter as Walter Tabinski, who's the cousin of notorious serial killer by the name of Clyde Forshaw out of a Toronto crime family. And Ollie has identified Clyde as a shooter at the vicinity of the Pergola. This is shooter number 7. You take the 6 I've identified, then you throw in Clyde Forshaw. He would be working for the Bothman family, which is really a representative of Israel. So he's the Israeli shooter. If we got a Dallas deputy sheriff, we got a Dallas cop, we got an Air Force expert, we got Lindson's personal, we got an anti-Castro Cuban, and we got a soldier of fortune CIA type. You can see how each of the different groups are putting in their own assassin. The one I have yet to identify was behind the tree, who appears to have fired a shot that actually hit JFK in the head approximately the same time the shot fired by Frank Sturgis hit him in the right temple. This was really stunning, the thoroughness, where both Ed Tatro and at least one other source, it was Rick Rosow, have shown photographs of the man coming up behind the tree on the South Knoll.
Okay, so going back to this monthly operational report for Project LIENVOY, this is a report that shows, which were the target lines that were intercepted. Okay, and then we move on to the second page, which shows Movimiento de Liberación Nacional, CTAL, DFS. This is a revista, is a magazine. Prensa Latina is a newspaper. Cuban Embassy, Soviet, and all the numbers. They're covering everything. The Chancery, military attaché, commercial office, films. I mean, they had all of the bases covered. Now. On what the next number 3 here, processing the information, and in all of the reports, all of them, not a single one fails to show this one passage here that shows processing of the LIENVOY information and what they did and how they interpreted, all of this, just incredible amounts of, there were thousands of pages. They must have had people working 24/7 on this, Jim. And in this case. You can go ahead and, if you can see this, can you see this?
The station continues to receive full transcripts in Spanish from 10 lines, 5 Cuban embassy and 5 Soviet embassy. The DIR number dated 13 August 1963 asked the station to send to headquarters 1 copy of the full transcripts from the Cuban embassy lines. These are being forwarded on a weekly basis. The first group is being forwarded as an attachment to HMMA 2200 dated 21 August 1963. If they do not please headquarters officers who desire them, it is requested that the Mexico station be promptly advised with any suggestions for changes. On 6 August 1963, Orville Horsfall, staff agent, arrived in Mexico to work presently as a unilateral monitor, but eventually as the supervisor of a TAP center, either under LIENVOY or
Le Tempo.
He has established himself outside and is presently at work eliminating the backlog of Soviet tapes.
They had so much information, so many transcripts and tapes that they had a backlog here.
Yeah, they had to send out a guy who could translate them, who obviously knew Russian.
Mm-hmm.
Douglas J. Fineglass continues to do the Russian from LIENVOY, the Russian from live feet lines on Soviet targets, and the Russian from the LIPON audio operation. In addition, Fineglass sends clip transcripts to the station ready for 201 files.
Live feet was the Cuban embassy, okay? Now look at the next one, exploiting the LIENVOY information. So what they're doing is processing the information and what they're going to do with it, and it's just on and on. It's just unbelievable. And then let's see, liaison. Okay, now this is important because liaison. This is what was going on. These were the meetings between Win Scott and the president of Mexico at the time. They were meeting on a monthly basis to discuss everything that was being under surveillance, all the information that was being produced by the surveillance. Okay, Adolfo Lopez Mateos, who is Litenzor. Okay, Litenzor is the president of Mexico. And what this is saying here, on August 15, 1963, Willard C. Curtis, who was Win Scott, met with Lopez Mateos, to arrange for a sensitive P. Bruman is Cuba case, reported the details of this meeting, okay? So we're talking about a nexus of the CIA and the president of Mexico, okay, who was deeply involved in this surveillance operation called LIENVOY, okay? And then again, here's another one where they detail all the target lines, okay? And this is month by month, month after month after month, Jim. They had all the bases covered here, Again, exploitation of the information, coverage of the Cuban, Czech, and Soviet embassies provided details of their personnel, their contacts, travel, and other usual CE data. They knew the time that everybody went to the can,
Right. Who they were sleeping with would have been child's play.
Yeah, of course. The traffic is reviewed for English-speaking persons who might be U.S. citizens, contact, spies, right, who might be going into the Soviet or embassy or, whatever. So, and then again, the liaison, during this reporting period, there were no meetings between the chief of station of Kubark, CIA, and Litenzor, the president of Mexico. However, regular contact was maintained with Lielegant. Lielegant was an agent for Litenzor. He was a go-between, okay? And we're still not exactly positive, 100% sure who he was, okay? But they were go-betweens between Win Scott, okay, and the president of Mexico, okay? And personnel. Here we go. On June 17, Robert Riggs resumed meeting Arnold Earhart and the routine case officer functions for LIENVOY. Okay, so it brings Ann Goodpasture back into the picture here. Okay.
You're doing a brilliant job with this, Larry. I got to tell you, this is just fantastic. Just
Well,
fantastic.
this is new stuff, Jim. You know, I mean,
I know it is. I know it is. That's really the underlying plot. I mean, you're moving ahead like a bulldozer.
you know, I think this is something that at the time, had this come out at that time, you know, there would have been they would have kicked the U.S. out of Mexico.
Yes, okay. Yes. The Mexicans have been aware of this massive surveillance.
Oh yeah.
Conducted.
Oh yeah.
Just as outrageous as how the U.S. is discrediting itself by trying to overthrow the democratically elected president of Venezuela to benefit its own self-interest. It's a disgrace. Larry, even Jimmy Carter was there as an observer. This is when Maduro was reelected to his second term. He had 60% of the vote, over 20 for his closest competitor. Jimmy Carter said the elections were fair and objective. He even remarked they are the best in the world. And here's the United States, in the name of freedom and democracy, seeking to overthrow another democratic government. I mean, it's so disgusting.
Now, here is a cable that I found that gives you a perfect example of how the U.S. via the CIA was dictating Mexican policy. You know, for example, the president of Mexico asked the CIA via Win Scott if it was okay to travel, because notice the date of this, September 12, 1962. This is right before the missile crisis, okay? And he's talking about, you know, this cable said this because of news stories of Soviet attitude, okay? And it says, if the elegant Latensor will, if Kubark feels world situation gloom, cancel a visit to the Far East, okay? I mean, you know, he's gonna depend on the CIA and the U.S. government to tell him if he should go, you know, on this diplomatic trip to the Far East, okay? And yeah, and this is, you know, all coming out of the tapes and the surveillance, you know? So basically, you know, going through all this, one sees that the Mexican government and the CIS were deeply, deeply involved with each other, you know, and with the advantage that the CIA made it possible for the president of Mexico to stay in power by finding out and being able to interfere with what his rivals were doing, okay, and with the help of the CIA. All right, this is what I wanted to show you guys. Okay, it's not very detailed, but I'm sure Gary can see the real.
We got reel-to-reels coming out our ears in this room.
Yeah, this is the old-style surveillance operation here with all these massive recording devices. They were analog at the time, but they were
exactly. Isn't this amazing?
Yeah, it's a warehouse to keep recording all these different phone lines.
And don't forget, this is old. Before, I don't know at the time if transistors or whatever it might have been, you know.
They still had tubes in those machines.
Yeah, and you know the electricity and the heat involved in, you know, in this type of room here, Gary. You know.
Yeah.
But it had to be temperature controlled. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, this is LIENVOY. This is the face of LIENVOY. Whoever, you know, if you want to study, you know, the audio surveillance and how they were able to intercept and record all these telephone lines. We're talking about, what are we talking about, 30 or 40 lines? You know, this is the equipment.
Yeah, that's right.
This is the equipment that you needed at the time to do that, Jim.
Sure.
You know? And so that's why, you know, now, you know, with these new documents, we're getting a much, much better idea, you know, because without this, you know, you can't really visualize.
Larry, think upon this. If they were that elaborate and thorough way back when in the 1960s, what are they doing today?
Yeah, I know. Exactly.
I mean, it's frightening.
Okay. Now, this is what I was telling you guys about, based on all these tapes and everything, you know, and this is what they're trying to do is they're trying to find out a way to involve Cuba or Fidel Castro into some type of operation to destabilize Mexico. Okay, so that
You mean they're trying to implicate him in such a fabricated attempt to to draw the wrath of the Mexican government against Cuba?
Well, and the Mexican people, actually. Jim.
Yeah. It's a propaganda operation.
Yeah, and that's what this is. So, and I thought the next couple of cables that we're gonna show you guys, just so unbelievable. It reminds me of Northwoods, and all this false flag operations and stuff like that,
No doubt it was of a kin. I mean, it was a related, a similar you just had a different name.
Go ahead, it's all yours.
Present station planning ref is as follows: preparation for ambassador Mexican version Cuban
subversive
paper for passage to Tello. Plan, fabricate on tape phony conversation of Cuban ambassador for insertion. LIENVOY mechanism. Attempt persuade longtime Mexican employee of Cuban embassy defect and make public statement condemning Cubans for interference Mexican affairs. Subject has indicated desire abandon job but not yet agreed to public statement. Failing public defection above subject. Attempting through subject obtain incriminating documents or propaganda from embassy suitable for sensational exploitation. Example, subject claims Cubans running indoctrination classes for Mexican youths within embassy building. Wow, that is so like what goes on every single day in the USA. Larry, this is a great find.
Yeah, we have to go back to where it says accuse the Mexican government, as is getting involved in, Cuban affairs or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
I told you guys you're gonna puke.
I love it, Larry.
Let me give you the next one. I think there's more here. The next page of that cable.
All security considerations permitting attempting range crash of automobile. 07 Cuban diplomat Rogelio Rodriguez crashed to involve special wider called undercar device with weapons and prop. Example, proving Cuban intervention in local labor problems. For your information, Mexicans now suspect Rodriguez engaged in Castro exocage type ops. Welcome HQS comments on above planning and any suggestions from headquarters.
Yeah, QCage, that's KU. QCage is another cryptonym for some project. Welcome.
This is what the U.S. does all the time. We're subverting, planning these psyops against other nations 24 hours, 7 days a week.
So the playbook hasn't changed, huh, Jim?
The playbook hasn't changed at all, Larry. In fact, these earlier, more primitive cases are highly illustrative and informative vis-a-vis more contemporary instances.
Here's where even the ambassador is involved in this.
In addition to the proposal advanced by Ambassador Mano to place certain telephone tap transcripts to high Mexican official station. Mexico City has just forwarded the following suggested operations designed to influence the Mexican government to break relations with Cuba prior to the OAS, Organization of American States Conference, to prepare the Mexican version of the paper on
Cuban subversive activities for the ambassador.
Cuban subversive activities for the ambassador to pass for foreign minister.
Tello.
Yeah, to fabricate a tape or phony conversation by the Cuban ambassador and insert it into the
joint telephone tapping operation we operate for the president.
Operate for the president to attempt to persuade a longtime Mexican employee of the Cuban embassy to defect and make a public statement condemning Cubans for interfering in Mexican affairs. Should it not be possible to have the subject above make a public defection attempt through him to obtain incriminating documents or propaganda from the Cuban embassy that are editable for
suitable.
exploitation. Yeah, revise them, change them, make up any damn thing you want. The subject has claimed that the Cubans are running indoctrination classes for Mexican youth within the embassy building. If security considerations permit, attempt to arrange a crash, yeah, of the automobile of the Cuban diplomat. I can't quite read his name, Larry. The crash would involve a special undercar device. This is, I think we read a similar.
Yeah, right, in the cable, yeah. And
this is all really, really, really revealing. I mean, this is just good stuff. You'd use this in a course on how this is done.
Right, so
in view of the highly sensitive nature of the operations proposed above and their timing prior to 22 January as related to the forthcoming OAS conference and the announced visit of President Kennedy to Mexico, it suggested that these operations be discussed with the Department of State in detail. This way this may be an inopportune time for such activities, since the Mexican government is likely to scrutinize with special care all events, whether bona fide or contrived, and the intervening.
And you can bet JFK was not made aware of all of these covert.
Of course not. Of course not. Of course not.
He had no idea all this subterfuge was taking place.
I mean, this is.
The thing is, they're recording everything with all these recorders, and if they don't get you with the recordings, they will edit it in and make it up.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Larry, you're doing a sensational job with this. I love it.
Thank you. This is quite revealing. I think this is stuff that nobody else has, and again, they say, oh, there's nothing in those documents. There's a ton of stuff in those documents, Jim.
Yeah, you're doing a great job of exploiting it, bringing it out, and clarifying its importance and why it makes a difference.
And now you see where this Goodpasture fits into all of this, because when they're wiretapping all these embassies and all these political figures and media, Mexican media entities, they know what everybody is doing, so they're able to stay one step or 2 or 3 steps ahead of the game and be able to dictate policy, be able to dictate everything that's going on in Mexico, and then to the point where they're trying to, create problems between Cuba and Mexico for public consumption, and then even influence the masses, in a way was unprecedented, just by having, these wiretaps and being able to do all this surveillance.
This is just sensational.
Great.
Larry, I'm just ecstatic about all of this. Gary, I think we've come to the end of this particular show tonight, but I think it was
revealing stuff, huh? Unbelievable stuff.
Completely sensational, Larry. I'm just
I felt like I was watching the news.
I couldn't be happier.
While you were reading these, I just see story after story right now.
None of this is going to make the mainstream. Believe me, it'll all remain hidden from the public forever.
Yeah.
And if you don't go to 153 News, it's even harder to find. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and call the show. This has been JFK number 226. More documents with Larry Rivera. We'll see you next week.
Adios.